It's something I have always wanted to do, and I and her best friend did it on our wedding night.
Soft music played in the distance. Laughter drifted through the hallway of the lakeside hotel as wedding guests continued celebrating late into the night. Only a few hours earlier, Naira Solen had walked down a garden aisle surrounded by white flowers and warm lights. Friends and family watched as she promised her future to the man she believed would stand beside her for the rest of her life. That man was Bradwell Dorse. Their wedding had looked perfect. Every detail reflected care and patience. The flowers came from the same shop where Naira grew up helping her parents arrange roses and lilies. The golden lights across the garden created a calm glow across the lake. Guests smiled as vows were exchanged. Cameras captured the moment Bradwell promised loyalty and partnership. For Naira, the night felt like the beginning of everything she had waited years to find, but hours later, the celebration moved to a luxury hotel nearby. Close friends gathered inside a private lounge where music and conversation filled the room. Naira had stepped away briefly to help a relative arrange transportation. Now she returned through a quiet hallway. As she approached the lounge door, familiar voices reached her ears. She recognized Bradwell's voice immediately. He sounded relaxed, carefree. Then Naira heard the sentence that stopped her mid-step.
It's something I have always wanted to do, and I and her best friend did it on our wedding night.
I and her best friend did it on our wedding night. Naira froze. The words echoed in her mind as if time had slowed around her. The voice that answered him belonged to someone she trusted almost as much as her husband. Varel Harton, Naira's closest friend. Naira stood motionless outside the door, her hand inches from the handle, realizing the night she believed marked the beginning of her future had already changed forever. Pause for a moment and think about something. Have you ever trusted someone so completely that you believed nothing could shake that bond? Think about the people you allow into your closest circle, the ones who hear your plans, the ones who celebrate your happiest moments, the ones you defend when others question them. Trust grows slowly. It forms through years of conversations, shared memories, and promises that feel unbreakable. Naira Solen believed deeply in that kind of trust. She believed love required patience. She believed loyalty stood at the center of every lasting relationship. For years, she lived by those values. She built her career around helping couples celebrate commitment and devotion. And she believed the two people standing closest to her on her wedding day shared those same values. Bradwell Dorse, the man she had just married, and Varel Harton, the friend who had stood beside her as maid of honor. If you had been there earlier that evening, you would have seen Naira smiling as guests raised their glasses in celebration. You would have seen Varel praising Naira during her speech. You would have watched Bradwell hold Naira's hand while promising a future filled with loyalty and respect. Everything looked genuine. Everything looked secure. So imagine standing outside a door, only hours later, and hearing words that instantly tear through every belief you held about the people closest to you. Imagine hearing your husband say something that makes you question whether the entire night was built on honesty at all. That is the moment Naira Solen found herself facing in that quiet hallway. Inside the lounge, the celebration continued as if nothing unusual had happened. Glasses clinked, someone laughed, chairs moved across the floor. To everyone inside the room, the evening still felt like a joyful extension of a beautiful wedding. But outside the door, Naira Solen stood completely still. Her mind began replaying the sentence she had just heard. I and her best friend did it on our wedding night. Bradwell's voice had sounded relaxed when he said it, almost casual, as though he were sharing a story without realizing the weight of his words. A quiet laugh followed from inside the room. Naira recognized that laugh instantly. Varel, the same woman who had helped her pick the wedding flowers, the same woman who had stood beside her at the altar only hours earlier, the same friend who had hugged her after the ceremony and promised she would always support her. Naira felt a slow pressure building inside her chest. Her thoughts moved quickly through recent memories. Private conversations between Bradwell and Varel during wedding planning. Small moments of laughter between them that she once ignored. Times when Varel insisted on helping Bradwell with certain planning details. At the time, Naira had seen those moments as harmless. She believed trust meant giving the people you love the benefit of doubt. But now those memories returned with a different meaning. And the words she had just heard made one terrifying possibility impossible to ignore. The two people she trusted most in the world might have already broken the promises made that very night. In that quiet hallway, Naira faced a moment few people ever expect to experience on their wedding night. Only hours earlier, she believed she had stepped into a future built on loyalty, patience, and shared dreams. Now, a single sentence threatened to destroy that belief. But here is the question that makes this story important. What do you do when the truth reaches you in the most unexpected way? Do you push the door open and confront everyone immediately? Do you demand answers in front of the same people who celebrated your wedding only hours before? Or do you step back, remain calm, and allow the truth to reveal itself fully? Naira understood something about life that many people forget in emotional moments. A rushed reaction can destroy clarity, and clarity matters when trust is involved. Standing outside that door, Naira realized she had only heard part of a conversation. She did not know what had led to that statement. She did not know what had happened earlier in the evening. She did not know whether Bradwell was joking or confessing, but she did know one thing. If those words carried the meaning they seemed to hold, the night that began with vows and celebration had already taken a direction she never expected. And the decision Naira made in the next few seconds would shape everything that followed. Before we continue this story, take a moment to share your thoughts. If you were standing where Naira stood in that hallway, what would you do? Would you open the door and confront them immediately, or would you walk away and wait until you understood the full truth? Write your answer in the comments. Your perspective matters, and many people watching this story may have faced moments where trust was suddenly questioned. Also, take a second to support this channel. Tap the subscribe button and join our storytelling community where every story carries a lesson about relationships, choices, and personal strength. Now let's return to Naira. Her hand slowly moved away from the lounge door. She did not open it. She did not interrupt the voices inside. Instead, Naira stepped backward into the quiet hallway. Her heart beat heavily, but her face remained calm. Inside the room, Bradwell and Varel continued speaking, unaware that the person most affected by their conversation had already heard everything she needed to hear. Naira turned and walked toward the elevator without making a sound. The celebration continued behind her. But in that moment, the first hours of her marriage had already begun to change in a way no guest inside that room could possibly imagine. And by morning, Naira Solen would make a decision that neither Bradwell nor Varel would see coming. Long before the night that changed everything, Naira Solen lived a quiet life shaped by patience and care. She grew up in a small lakeside town near Seattle, where the rhythm of daily life moved slowly and people valued relationships that lasted for years rather than moments. Her parents owned a modest flower studio, located on a peaceful street filled with cafes and bookstores. The shop was not large, but it carried warmth. Neighbors often stopped in to buy flowers for birthdays, anniversaries, or simple gestures of appreciation. As a child, Naira spent many afternoons inside that shop, standing beside her mother while arranging roses, lilies, and white peonies into careful displays. Flowers were not only decorations in Naira's childhood, they were lessons. Her mother often explained how every bloom required patience. Some flowers opened quickly, while others took time. Water, sunlight, and steady care determined how long they would last. If someone rushed the process or handled them carelessly, the petals would fall apart. Naira listened carefully. Those small lessons shaped how she viewed the world. She believed meaningful things developed slowly. Friendships required effort. Love required trust. Commitment required respect. While other children rushed through the shop to play outside, Naira enjoyed the quiet work of arranging flowers. She liked creating something that could bring happiness to someone else's day. The flower studio became her first classroom. Customers spoke openly about their lives while waiting for bouquets. Some celebrated joyful moments. Others shared stories of challenges in their relationships. Naira observed those conversations quietly and learned something important. The strongest relationships were built on patience and honesty. Without those qualities, even the most beautiful promises could fade. Those lessons stayed with Naira as she grew older, shaping the thoughtful person she would eventually become. As Naira entered adulthood, the quiet lessons from her childhood guided the choices she made about her future. When it came time to select a field of study, she did not hesitate long. She enrolled at a respected university in Washington State and chose to study event design. For Naira, the decision felt natural. She had grown up watching how small details could influence how people felt during important moments. A carefully chosen flower arrangement could brighten a room. Soft lighting could change the atmosphere of a celebration. Music and decoration could transform an ordinary space into something memorable. During her university years, Naira quickly gained attention from her professors. Her work stood out not because it was flashy, but because it felt thoughtful and balanced. She paid attention to details others often ignored. Where should guests enter a room so they feel welcomed immediately? How should the lighting change throughout an evening so people feel comfortable and relaxed? What colors create a sense of warmth during meaningful ceremonies? These questions guided her designs. While many students rushed to complete projects quickly, Naira approached each assignment with patience. She believed every event represented someone's life story. Weddings, especially, carried deep meaning. Two people stood before family and friends to promise loyalty and partnership. That moment deserved careful preparation. After graduation, Naira decided to build something of her own. Instead of joining an established company, she opened a small planning studio called Selene Events. The beginning was simple: a modest office, a small team, a few early clients who trusted her vision. But word spread quickly. People noticed that events organized by Naira felt personal rather than generic. Each ceremony reflected the couple's personality and values. Within 3 years, her calendar stayed full. Naira had quietly built a reputation for creating celebrations people remembered long after the music ended. While Naira focused on growing her career, her personal life moved at a slower pace. Many of her friends entered relationships quickly after university, often chasing excitement or rushing toward commitments before truly understanding their partners. Naira took a different path. She believed the right relationship should grow naturally rather than through pressure. Her work exposed her to hundreds of weddings, and those experiences taught her valuable lessons about love. Some couples treated their ceremony like a performance. Everything looked perfect for photographs, yet their conversations revealed tension. Others spoke with genuine respect and calm understanding. Naira noticed the difference. The couples who truly listened to each other and supported one another usually built stronger futures together. Because of this observation, Naira never rushed into relationships. She enjoyed meeting new people and sharing conversations, but she remained selective about who she allowed into her life. Her schedule also remained demanding. Planning large events required long hours, detailed preparation, and constant communication with clients. Many evenings ended with Naira reviewing design layouts or confirming arrangements with vendors. Still, she never felt lonely. Her work gave her purpose. Helping couples celebrate important milestones brought genuine satisfaction. When a ceremony ended successfully and families gathered to share laughter and gratitude, Naira felt proud of the role she played in creating those memories. Deep inside, she believed love would arrive when the timing felt right. Not through pressure, not through chance encounters that lacked meaning, but through a connection built on respect and shared values. Naira trusted that when the right person appeared in her life, the relationship would grow with the same patience she had learned from flowers in her parents' shop. Anyone who worked with Naira Selene quickly noticed her calm presence. She spoke with a steady tone, listened carefully, and rarely allowed stressful situations to disturb her focus. Event planning often brought unexpected challenges. Vendors arrived late. Weather changed suddenly. Guests requested last-minute adjustments. Many planners reacted with visible frustration when things moved off schedule. Naira responded differently. She paused, assessed the situation, and searched for solutions without raising her voice. Her clients admired that quality because it created confidence during moments that could easily become chaotic. Her patience also appeared in the way she treated people. Staff members at venues appreciated working with her because she respected their time and effort. Florists trusted her judgment when selecting arrangements. Photographers knew her events would run smoothly because she organized every detail carefully. Friends described Naira as thoughtful and dependable. She remembered birthdays. She checked on people when they faced difficult weeks. She listened when others needed someone to talk to. At the same time, Naira carried quiet strength. She did not seek attention or compete for approval in social circles. Her confidence came from knowing who she was and what she valued. Loyalty, honesty, and commitment stood at the center of her beliefs. When she promised something, she followed through. Those qualities shaped the reputation she built in both her professional and personal life. People trusted Naira because her actions matched her words, and although she lived in a world where many chased excitement or recognition, Naira preferred stability and meaningful connections. That quiet strength made others respect her deeply, even if they did not always understand how firmly she protected her principles. Naira's life reflected steady progress built through dedication rather than shortcuts. She respected hard work and believed success meant more than financial gain. For her, success meant building something that positively influenced the lives of others. Each wedding she designed carried that intention. Couples often approached her feeling overwhelmed by the responsibility of planning such an important day. Naira guided them patiently through each decision, helping them focus on what truly mattered: family, commitment, shared goals. Many clients later returned to thank her not only for organizing their ceremony, but also for reminding them why they chose each other in the first place. That ability to bring clarity to emotional moments made Naira special. Her values also reflected loyalty toward the people closest to her. She maintained strong relationships with her parents and frequently visited the flower shop that shaped her childhood. Even as her business grew, she never forgot where she started. Friends relied on her for advice and support. Among those friendships, one relationship stood out as particularly strong. During her years at university, Naira met someone whose personality contrasted sharply with her own. While Naira preferred quiet environments and thoughtful planning, this friend enjoyed excitement, lively gatherings, and bold conversations. Despite their differences, they formed a close bond. Late nights studying design concepts turned into long conversations about life, ambition, and future dreams. This friend admired Naira's stability. Naira admired her confidence. Over time, their connection grew strong enough that Naira trusted her deeply. Her name was Varel Harton. Confident, stylish, and full of energy, Varel entered Naira's life during university and quickly became one of the most influential people in her personal story. Several years after launching Celine Events, Naira Celine built a reputation across Seattle's professional circles. Her work appeared at charity dinners, cultural events, and private celebrations organized for business leaders and community organizations. These events often introduced her to people from industries far beyond event planning. One autumn evening, Naira attended a charity showcase hosted by a group of architects and urban developers raising funds for a waterfront community project. The event took place inside a modern gallery space overlooking Elliott Bay. Tall windows revealed the evening skyline, while guests moved through displays presenting design models and planning concepts. Naira attended partly out of curiosity and partly to support the charity. Events like these often inspired ideas she could later apply to her own work. While walking through the gallery, one presentation caught her attention. A detailed architectural model displayed a waterfront neighborhood designed with open parks, pedestrian walkways, and residential buildings, positioned to preserve the view of the harbor. The concept balanced beauty and practicality in a way that impressed Naira immediately. Standing beside the presentation board was the architect responsible for the project, Bradwell Dorse. He spoke calmly to a small group of guests, explaining how thoughtful design could transform urban spaces into communities where people felt connected rather than crowded. His voice carried quiet confidence. Instead of dramatic gestures, he focused on clear explanations that helped people understand the purpose behind every element. Naira listened from a short distance before stepping closer. When the group finished asking questions, she approached him and offered a sincere compliment about the design. Bradwell thanked her with a polite smile. That brief exchange became the first moment their paths crossed. Neither of them realized at the time that the conversation beginning beside a presentation board would soon shape the direction of both their lives. After the initial introduction, Bradwell asked Naira what had drawn her to the event. When she explained that she owned an event planning company, his interest became immediately noticeable. He asked thoughtful questions about her work. What kind of events did she enjoy designing most? How did she approach creating spaces that made people feel comfortable and welcomed? Naira appreciated that his questions felt genuine, rather than polite conversation. Many people at networking events ask surface-level questions before shifting attention elsewhere. Bradwell listened carefully and waited for her to finish speaking before responding. Their conversation gradually moved away from the crowded gallery floor. Nearby doors led to a balcony overlooking the harbor. The evening air carried the scent of the ocean, and lights from passing boats reflected across the water. They stepped outside where the noise of the event softened into distant music and conversation. Bradwell explained more about his architectural work. His projects focused on creating residential communities where design encouraged interaction among neighbors while preserving natural views of the landscape. Naira found the philosophy familiar. Her work followed a similar idea. Events succeeded when the environment allowed people to connect comfortably. Layout, lighting, and atmosphere influenced how guests interacted with one another. The similarities between their professions surprised both of them. Although one designed buildings and the other designed experiences, their thinking followed the same principle. Spaces should bring people together. They spoke for nearly half an hour without noticing how quickly time passed. The conversation moved easily from professional topics to personal interests. By the time they returned inside the gallery, the event had already progressed toward its closing remarks. Both of them sensed that the conversation should not end there. Within a few days of the charity event, Bradwell contacted Naira and invited her to meet for coffee. The invitation felt natural after their conversation on the harbor balcony, and Naira accepted without hesitation. Their first meeting outside the event confirmed the impression they had formed earlier. Bradwell remained thoughtful and attentive during conversation. Instead of dominating discussions, he listened carefully and asked questions that encouraged Naira to share her thoughts. They quickly discovered several shared interests. Both enjoyed visiting art exhibits around the city. Architecture and event design both relied heavily on visual composition, so galleries became natural places for them to spend time together. They also shared an appreciation for quiet restaurants where conversation could flow without distraction. Over the following months, their connection developed steadily. Weekend afternoons often included walks through Seattle's waterfront parks or visits to cultural exhibitions across the city. Sometimes Bradwell showed Naira architectural projects he admired. Other times, Naira described event concepts she was developing for upcoming ceremonies. Their conversations rarely felt forced. Each meeting revealed another layer of compatibility. Bradwell admired the care Naira placed into her work and the calm way she approached challenges. Naira respected Bradwell's discipline and the thoughtful purpose behind his designs. Attraction grew gradually, rather than through dramatic moments. There were no rushed declarations or overwhelming displays of affection. Instead, their relationship developed through mutual respect and shared curiosity about each other's perspectives. Friends who observed them together often commented on the balance between them. Bradwell's quiet confidence matched Naira's calm personality, creating a connection that felt steady and genuine. For Naira, the relationship reflected the same lesson she had learned years earlier in her parents' flower shop. Meaningful things grow best when given time. As the months passed, Naira and Bradwell developed routines that strengthened their connection. Their relationship did not revolve around grand displays or dramatic experiences. Instead, it grew through consistent moments that allowed trust to deepen naturally. Many evenings ended with long conversations over dinner. Sometimes they discussed their professional goals. Bradwell shared plans for future architectural projects that aimed to create neighborhoods designed for community living. Naira described her vision for expanding Celine events into larger productions while preserving the thoughtful style that defined her work. They also spoke about personal values. Bradwell expressed a desire to build a stable life where family and meaningful work existed in balance. Naira appreciated hearing those priorities because they reflected the same outlook she carried. Both believed that success meant more than professional recognition. Success meant building a life that allowed relationships to thrive. During quieter weekends, they visited parks outside the city, where walking paths followed the shoreline. Those peaceful settings allowed conversations to move beyond career ambitions and into deeper topics about family history, childhood experiences, and hopes for the future. Naira gradually allowed herself to trust Bradwell completely. He remained consistent in his behavior. When he promised to call, he called. When he scheduled time together, he arrived on time and fully present. His reliability created a sense of security that Naira valued deeply. Friends who met Bradwell often described him as composed and respectful. For Naira, those qualities reinforced the belief that she had finally found the kind of relationship she had always hoped to build. A partnership based on patience, honesty, and shared direction. After nearly 2 years of dating, Both of them understood that their connection had become something lasting. 2 years after their first meeting at the charity showcase, Bradwell invited Naira to take an evening walk along the same lakeside path where they had often spent quiet weekends together. The sun had already begun to set when they arrived. Soft golden light reflected across the water, while a gentle breeze moved through the trees lining the shoreline. It was a peaceful scene that matched the calm rhythm their relationship had developed over time. They walked slowly along the path, speaking about upcoming projects and small plans for the coming months. At one point, Bradwell paused near a bench overlooking the lake. Naira turned toward him, noticing a thoughtful expression on his face. For a moment he said nothing. Then he reached into the pocket of his jacket and removed a small velvet box. Naira's heart immediately understood what was happening. Bradwell spoke carefully, choosing his words with the same patience that defined his personality. He told Naira that the past 2 years had shown him what true partnership looked like. Her dedication to her work, her loyalty to family, and the calm strength she carried through every challenge had convinced him that he wanted to build a future beside her. Then he opened the box. Inside rested a simple but elegant ring. Bradwell asked Naira if she would marry him. Emotion filled the quiet space between them as Naira nodded with a smile that reflected both happiness and certainty. She said yes without hesitation. That evening marked the beginning of their engagement and the first steps toward planning the wedding that would soon bring together their families and closest friends. Among those friends stood one person who celebrated the news with particular excitement, Virel Harton. Yet as the wedding planning months unfolded, Naira would slowly notice that Virel seemed unusually interested in spending time around both her and Bradwell whenever possible. After Bradwell's proposal, wedding planning began almost immediately. For Naira Celine, organizing the ceremony was both exciting and meaningful. She had spent years designing weddings for other couples, yet planning her own felt different. Every decision carried emotional weight because this event represented the start of a new chapter in her life. Naira chose a peaceful garden venue beside the lake, just outside Seattle. The location reflected everything she valued about celebrations. Soft lighting could glow across the water as the evening approached, and guests could move easily between the ceremony space and reception area without feeling crowded. As soon as the engagement news spread, Virel Harton stepped forward with enthusiasm. She insisted on helping with nearly every aspect of preparation. At first, Naira welcomed the support. Virel had always enjoyed lively social environments and possessed strong opinions about style and presentation. Since Naira trusted her deeply, involving her in the process felt natural. Virel attended venue visits, dress fittings, and tasting sessions with caterers. She offered suggestions about floral arrangements, music selections, and seating layouts. Her energy often filled the room during planning meetings. Sometimes she spoke so passionately about the wedding that vendors assumed she worked for Naira's company. Naira laughed whenever those moments occurred. She appreciated having a friend who seemed so invested in making the celebration memorable. Bradwell also welcomed Virel's involvement. He often joked that planning a wedding required patience and teamwork. Since Naira already handled many professional responsibilities, having Virel assist with smaller decisions made the process easier. From Naira's perspective, everything appeared positive. Her closest friend was helping her prepare for an important day, and her fiancé seemed comfortable with the collaboration. Yet the amount of time Virel spent around both of them slowly increased as the wedding approached. At the time, Naira saw that involvement as loyalty rather than anything unusual. As planning continued, the wedding gradually became the center of many conversations among Naira's friends and family. Invitations needed confirmation, schedules required adjustment, and vendors regularly contacted Naira's office with updates. During this busy period, Virel often took the initiative to communicate directly with Bradwell when certain decisions involved his preferences. At first, those conversations seemed practical. If Naira was occupied with a client meeting or reviewing design plans, Virel might send Bradwell a message asking about guest accommodations or transportation arrangements. Since the wedding involved guests arriving from several cities, coordinating details required constant communication. Bradwell appreciated the assistance. He frequently responded quickly and thanked Virel for helping manage tasks that might otherwise slow down the planning process. Occasionally, Naira would enter a room and find them discussing something related to the ceremony. Perhaps they were reviewing the timeline for the rehearsal dinner or comparing ideas for music during the reception. These moments usually ended with smiles and friendly comments. Naira never felt excluded. Both of them explained what they had been discussing and asked for her opinion before finalizing any decisions. Still, the number of private conversations between them increased as the weeks passed. Sometimes Naira noticed them speaking quietly during group gatherings. Other times Varel mentioned she had already checked with Bradwell about a detail Naira had planned to discuss later. None of these interactions seemed inappropriate on their own. In fact, many couples rely on close friends to help organize weddings. Naira viewed their communication as cooperation, rather than anything concerning. Trust remained the foundation of her relationship with both of them. Because of that trust, she rarely questioned how often their conversations occurred when she was not present. Among Naira's circle of friends, Varel Harton carried a personality that often brought laughter into conversations. She enjoyed lively gatherings, stylish clothing, and discussions about travel or high-end experiences. Her sense of humor frequently appeared during wedding planning. Whenever Bradwell joined meetings or group dinners, Varel sometimes made playful remarks about the lifestyle Naira would enjoy after marrying a successful architect. "Naira," she once joked while reviewing reception decor options, "after this wedding you're going to need a much larger closet. A wife of a famous designer deserves plenty of elegant outfits." The comment made everyone laugh. Bradwell responded with a smile and reminded Varel that his work involved long hours at drafting tables rather than glamorous parties. On another occasion, while discussing honeymoon ideas, Varel teased Naira about choosing destinations that matched Bradwell's reputation. "If you two visit Italy," she said with amusement, "make sure you send photos from those waterfront hotels. Someone needs to enjoy that view if you're both busy working." Naira usually responded with gentle humor of her own. She reminded Varel that the most important part of the marriage was not luxury or travel, but the partnership she and Bradwell were building together. Bradwell often listened quietly during these exchanges, smiling politely while letting the conversation move forward. To Naira, Varel's comments seemed harmless. They reflected the energetic personality that had always defined her friend. Varel enjoyed excitement and bold conversation, while Naira preferred calm environments and thoughtful planning. Those differences had always balanced their friendship. Yet in hindsight, those jokes revealed something subtle. Varel spoke about Bradwell's success and lifestyle far more frequently than Naira did. At the time, Naira dismissed those remarks as playful exaggeration. As the wedding date moved closer, Naira's schedule grew increasingly demanding. Managing Celine events while planning her own ceremony required careful time management and constant attention to detail. During these busy weeks, small observations occasionally passed through her mind. Sometimes she noticed how quickly Bradwell and Varel continued conversations even after she entered the room. Other times, Varel seemed especially curious about Bradwell's professional projects or travel plans. Yet none of these moments lasted long enough to create genuine concern. Naira believed strongly in the importance of trust. Her relationship with Bradwell had developed slowly over 2 years of shared experiences. He had consistently demonstrated reliability and respect throughout that time. Whenever he promised something, he followed through. That consistency created confidence in Naira's mind. She also trusted Varel deeply. Their friendship began during university, when they spent countless evenings studying together and sharing personal goals. Through years of conversations and experiences, Varel had supported Naira during difficult moments and celebrated her successes. Because of that history, Naira rarely allowed doubt to take root. When small questions appeared in her thoughts, she dismissed them quickly. Planning a wedding often created stress for everyone involved. People spoke frequently, exchanged messages constantly, and gathered in groups where conversations overlapped. It felt natural that Bradwell and Varel would interact more often while coordinating details for such a large event. Naira reminded herself that strong relationships required confidence rather than suspicion. She focused on the positive aspects of the planning process and continued preparing the ceremony she had always imagined. At that stage, she believed her trust reflected wisdom rather than vulnerability. In the final weeks before the wedding, planning meetings became more frequent as vendors confirmed schedules and guests finalized travel arrangements. Many of these gatherings took place at Naira's office or at cafes where the group could review details comfortably. During one such afternoon meeting, Naira noticed a small interaction that briefly caught her attention. Varel and Bradwell were discussing the seating arrangement for the reception, while Naira reviewed floral orders with a supplier on the phone. When she finished the call and turned back toward the table, she saw both of them laughing about something she had not heard. The moment lasted only a few seconds. When they realized Naira had finished her call, Varel quickly explained the joke. Bradwell nodded and repeated the story so Naira could join the conversation. Naira smiled and continued reviewing the seating chart. Similar moments occurred occasionally during other planning sessions. Bradwell and Varel sometimes seemed relaxed in conversation even when Naira stepped away briefly. None of these interactions appeared inappropriate. Bradwell treated Varel with the same polite friendliness he showed toward Naira's other friends. Varel responded with her usual energetic personality. Still, the ease of their conversations stood out from time to time. One evening during a rehearsal planning meeting at the venue, Naira stepped outside to answer a call from a client. When she returned several minutes later, she noticed Bradwell and Varel standing near the garden entrance speaking quietly. They stopped talking as soon as they saw her approaching. Varel turned with a bright smile and began discussing the rehearsal schedule. Bradwell joined the conversation naturally. Naira did not question the moment, but as she continued reviewing notes for the ceremony, a small thought passed through her mind. She wondered briefly what they had been discussing before she returned. For a second, curiosity appeared. Then she pushed the thought aside and returned her focus to preparing the wedding she believed would mark the happiest day of her life. Before moving to the next chapter, share your opinion in the comments. Would you notice these small moments as possible warning signs, or would you trust your partner and close friend the same way Naira did? The morning of Naira Salim's wedding arrived with a quiet sense of anticipation that filled the lakeside venue long before the first guest appeared. Soft sunlight moved across the surface of the water as decorators completed the final arrangements along the garden path where the ceremony would soon take place. Naira had designed every detail with intention. White roses and peonies lined the aisle, arranged carefully to create a gentle frame for the walkway. Golden chairs faced a floral arch positioned near the lake so that guests could see the calm water behind the couple as they exchanged vows. The setting reflected the same philosophy Naira had carried throughout her career. Simplicity paired with warmth. Inside a nearby preparation room, Naira stood before a large mirror as her stylist completed the final touches on her hair. Her wedding gown reflected her personality perfectly. The design was elegant without unnecessary decoration, allowing the fabric and silhouette to speak quietly rather than loudly. Her parents stood nearby, watching with pride. Her mother adjusted a small section of the veil and reminded Naira that the flowers decorating the ceremony space had been prepared that morning in their shop. Moments later, guests began taking their seats. Bradwell Dorse stood beneath the floral arch waiting for Naira. His posture remained calm, though his expression revealed the emotion of the moment. When the music began, the garden grew silent. Naira stepped forward with her father beside her and walked slowly down the aisle. Every face turned toward her as she approached Bradwell. Their eyes met. In that moment, Naira believed her future had arrived exactly as she had hoped. They joined hands beneath the arch and spoke their vows, promising patience, loyalty, and partnership for the years ahead. After the ceremony concluded, the atmosphere of the garden transformed into a lively celebration. Soft music filled the air while guests gathered around tables decorated with flowers and warm lantern light. Naira and Bradwell moved from table to table greeting friends and family members who had traveled from many cities to attend the wedding. Laughter carried across the lawn as conversations began among relatives who had not seen each other in years. Photographers captured smiling faces while servers delivered dinner courses carefully prepared for the evening. The reception reflected the same thoughtful design that defined Naira's professional work. Each table carried a different floral arrangement inspired by the lakeside environment. Gentle lighting illuminated the space as the sun slowly lowered toward the horizon. Bradwell's colleagues from the architecture community congratulated the couple and shared stories about his recent projects. Naira's clients and friends praised the beauty of the event, often reminding her that only someone with her experience could design a celebration that felt so personal. The newly married couple shared their first dance beneath a canopy of lights. Guests gathered around the dance floor, applauding as the music carried the moment forward. For Naira, the evening felt like the perfect beginning to the life she had imagined. Her parents smiled proudly while watching her move through the crowd with confidence and happiness. Bradwell remained close beside her throughout most of the evening, occasionally stepping away to greet friends or speak with relatives who wanted to congratulate him. At every moment, the atmosphere remained joyful. No one present had any reason to believe that the calm celebration unfolding beside the lake would soon lead to a conversation that could change everything. As dinner concluded and guests finished their conversations, the time arrived for speeches honoring the newly married couple. A soft chime from the master of ceremonies signaled for attention, and the music lowered so that everyone could hear clearly. Varel Harton stepped forward holding a glass and a small card containing notes she had prepared. The room quieted immediately. Many guests already knew Varel as Naira's closest friend, and her confident presence naturally drew attention whenever she spoke. She began her speech with a warm smile directed toward Naira. Varel described the years they had spent together since university. She spoke about late-night study sessions, shared dreams about their futures, and the many conversations they had about relationships and loyalty. Several guests laughed when she recalled moments from their younger days, when Naira insisted that patience mattered more than rushing into romance. She always believed love should grow slowly, Varel said while looking across the room. Her voice softened slightly as she turned toward Bradwell. And when she met Bradwell, we all saw how happy she became. The guests responded with approving smiles and gentle applause. Varel continued by praising Bradwell's dedication to his career and the respectful way he treated Naira from the beginning of their relationship. She concluded by raising her glass. To two people who remind us that trust and commitment still matter. The audience lifted their glasses in agreement as the couple thanked her warmly. Naira felt emotional hearing the words of someone she trusted so deeply. The speech seemed to confirm everything she believed about the strength of her friendships and the promise of her marriage. For the rest of the evening, the celebration continued with renewed energy. As the formal reception drew to a close, many guests began preparing to return to their hotels or continue conversations in smaller groups. However, several close friends and family members were not ready for the evening to end. Bradwell suggested continuing the celebration at a nearby luxury hotel overlooking the same lake where the ceremony had taken place earlier. The hotel contained a private lounge reserved for guests who wanted a more relaxed environment to continue talking and enjoying the night. Within half an hour, a group of friends gathered inside the lounge, where comfortable seating surrounded low tables filled with drinks and small desserts. Soft music played through hidden speakers while the large windows revealed the quiet lake outside. Naira arrived with Bradwell shortly after the group had settled in. She removed her heels and laughed as she sank into one of the sofas, finally allowing herself a moment to relax after months of planning. Varel joined the group soon afterward, still energized by the excitement of the evening. Several guests shared stories about the ceremony, while others discussed travel plans for the following day. The mood remained cheerful and light. Bradwell stood near one of the tables speaking with a few friends from the architecture firm where he worked. Varel moved easily between conversations, occasionally teasing Naira about how elegant the wedding had looked. As the evening continued, the atmosphere grew more casual. Jackets were removed, ties loosened, and the group settled into comfortable discussions that drifted between humor and reflection. For Naira, the night still felt like a dream. Her wedding day had unfolded exactly as she imagined, and the celebration now continued among the people she trusted most. At that moment, nothing suggested that the night was approaching a turning point. After nearly an hour inside the lounge, Naira received a message from one of her relatives who had attended the wedding earlier in the evening. The message explained that transportation arrangements back to the hotel had become confusing for a few family members unfamiliar with the city. Because Naira always felt responsible for ensuring guests felt comfortable, she stood from the sofa and told Bradwell she would step outside briefly to help coordinate the situation. Bradwell nodded with understanding and continued speaking with a group of friends near the window. Naira walked into the quiet hallway outside the lounge where she called the transportation service and confirmed the correct pickup location for her relatives. The conversation lasted several minutes as she provided directions and reassured them that a car would arrive shortly. Once the issue was resolved, Naira ended the call and began walking back toward the lounge door. Inside the room, voices and laughter continued. As Naira approached the door, she slowed her steps slightly. Two voices had separated from the rest of the group, Bradwell's voice and Varel's. The conversation sounded quieter than the others, almost as if they had moved toward a corner of the lounge away from the main group. Naira paused instinctively before reaching the handle. She had not intended to listen, yet the familiar tone of their voices caught her attention for a brief moment. For a few seconds she stood in the hallway while their conversation continued inside. Then Naira lifted her hand toward the door. She prepared to walk back into the room, where her new husband and closest friend were speaking privately. Naira Solene's hand hovered near the lounge door as the voices inside continued. The hallway outside the room felt strangely quiet compared to the laughter and conversation coming from within. She had intended to walk back inside immediately, but Bradwell's voice stopped her. It carried clearly through the partially closed door. His tone sounded relaxed, almost amused, the same way he often spoke when telling stories among friends. At first, Naira assumed he was sharing a memory from the evening. The wedding had been filled with small moments people enjoyed recalling. Guests had spent hours discussing the ceremony, the decorations, and the speeches. Then Bradwell said a sentence that froze her completely. "I and her best friend did it on our wedding night." For a moment, Naira wondered if she had misunderstood. The words felt impossible. Her mind searched for another meaning, something harmless that might explain what she had heard. Perhaps the conversation referred to a joke, or some harmless misunderstanding between friends. But the silence that followed inside the room made the moment heavier. Someone inside the lounge asked a question Naira could not clearly hear. Bradwell answered again, speaking more casually, as though the statement required no explanation. Naira felt her heartbeat grow louder in her ears. Only hours earlier, Bradwell had stood beside her beneath the floral arch and promised loyalty. He had looked into her eyes while speaking those vows. Now the sentence she had just heard seemed to contradict everything he had promised. Naira remained motionless in the hallway. Her fingers slowly lowered from the door handle. The celebration inside the lounge continued, unaware that someone standing just outside the door had heard words that could change the meaning of the entire evening. Naira's mind continued trying to process the sentence she had just heard when another sound reached her ears. A soft laugh. She recognized it instantly. Virel Harton. Naira had known that laugh for years. It was the same sound she heard during long university nights when they studied together or shared stories about their plans for the future. Now that familiar sound carried a different meaning. Inside the lounge, Virel's voice followed the quiet laugh with a brief comment Naira could not fully hear. Her tone sounded playful rather than surprised. The reaction unsettled Naira even more than Bradwell's words. If the statement had been a joke or misunderstanding, Virel's response might have included confusion or denial. Instead, the laugh suggested comfort with the conversation taking place. Naira's thoughts began moving quickly. She remembered the months leading to the wedding, the frequent conversations between Bradwell and Virel during planning meetings, the moments when they spoke quietly while she handled other tasks, the playful jokes Virel made about Bradwell's lifestyle and success. At the time, those moments had seemed harmless. Now they returned to her memory with a new weight. Inside the lounge, another guest asked something that caused a few people to laugh again. The conversation drifted toward another topic, as though nothing important had just been said. To everyone inside the room, the evening continued normally, but outside the door, Naira felt a growing sense that she had just overheard something that could not easily be explained away. The sound of Virel's laughter lingered in her mind longer than the words themselves, because laughter often reveals comfort where silence might reveal guilt. For several seconds, Naira remained standing in the hallway without moving. Her first instinct urged her to open the door immediately. Part of her wanted to walk inside and demand an explanation from both Bradwell and Virel. The thought flashed through her mind quickly. If she confronted them now, she could hear the truth directly from their voices. But another instinct slowed her. Years of organizing important events had taught Naira something valuable about difficult moments. Immediate reactions often create confusion. Calm observation reveals more. Inside the lounge, the group continued talking. Someone began telling a humorous story about the ceremony earlier that day. Chairs shifted as people moved around the room. Nothing about the atmosphere suggested tension or discomfort. If Bradwell's statement had been serious, no one inside the lounge appeared concerned. Naira realized that walking into the room now might only produce explanations shaped by surprise rather than honesty. Instead, she stepped back from the door. Her breathing remained steady, even though her chest felt tight. She understood that she had heard only part of a conversation. Without more information, confronting them immediately might lead to arguments without clarity. Slowly, Naira turned away from the door. Her steps remained quiet as she walked down the hallway toward the elevator. Behind her, the celebration continued, as if the evening still represented nothing more than the joyful ending of a wedding day. But for Naira, the night had already changed direction. The words she had heard refused to leave her thoughts. And although she had chosen silence in that moment, the question of what those words truly meant followed her every step. Instead of returning to the lounge, Naira took the elevator to one of the guest floors reserved for wedding visitors. The hallway felt quiet compared to the energy of the celebration below. She entered the suite assigned to her earlier that evening and closed the door behind her. For the first time since hearing Bradwell's words, she allowed herself to sit down and breathe slowly. Outside the window, the lake reflected faint lights from the city across the water. Boats moved quietly in the distance while the night continued peacefully. Naira stared at the view for several minutes. Her mind replayed the moment outside the lounge door again and again. Bradwell's voice, the exact sentence he had spoken, Virel's laugh. Each detail repeated in her thoughts as she tried to determine whether she had misunderstood something important. Part of her hoped the conversation carried another meaning. Perhaps Bradwell had been repeating someone else's story. Perhaps Virel's laughter reflected surprise rather than agreement. But another part of her remembered the small moments from the months before the wedding. Private conversations, familiar laughter between Bradwell and Virel, the ease of their interactions during planning meetings. Those memories now felt heavier. Naira spent most of the night awake, sitting beside the window as the hours passed slowly. She did not cry or allow anger to control her thoughts. Instead, she focused on understanding what she had heard. One question repeated quietly in her mind. If Bradwell's words had been true, when had this betrayal begun? By the time morning light appeared across the lake, Naira understood that the answer might reveal itself only if she remained patient. Several weeks passed after the wedding, and Naira continued her daily routines as though nothing unusual had happened. She returned to managing Celine events and focused on upcoming projects that required her attention. Bradwell behaved normally throughout that time. He spoke about work, attended meetings, and treated Naira with the same calm manner he had always shown. To anyone observing them, their marriage appeared stable. Naira also continued interacting with Virel. Her friend maintained the same friendly energy she had always displayed. They met for coffee occasionally and exchanged messages about upcoming social gatherings. Yet Naira remained observant. She had decided not to confront either of them until she understood the truth clearly. One afternoon, while organizing documents in Bradwell's home office, Naira noticed his tablet resting on the desk. A notification appeared on the screen before she had time to step away. The message preview displayed only a single line, but that line carried enough meaning. Last night meant more than you think. The message came from Virel. Naira stared at the screen without touching the device. The sentence confirmed what she had begun to suspect. The words she heard outside the lounge door had not been a misunderstanding. They reflected something real. For several seconds, Naira stood silently in the office. Then she turned away from the desk. Before we continue, think about this moment. If you discovered a message like this involving your partner and your closest friend, what would you do next? Write your thoughts in the comments. Because Naira Selene had already reached a decision. She would not react with anger. She would respond with patience and careful planning. After seeing the message on Bradwell's tablet, Naira Selene understood that the doubts she had carried since the wedding night were no longer questions. The sentence she overheard outside the hotel lounge had been real. The message from Virel confirmed that something had happened between them. Even so, Naira did not allow the discovery to change her behavior immediately. That decision required discipline. When Bradwell returned home later that evening, Naira greeted him the same way she always had. She asked about his day and listened while he spoke about an architecture meeting involving a new residential project near the waterfront. Bradwell appeared relaxed. He spoke about building designs, construction schedules, and potential investors with the same calm tone Naira had heard throughout their relationship. Nothing in his behavior suggested concern or suspicion. Naira watched him carefully while they spoke. If he sensed that she had seen the message, he showed no sign of it. During dinner, they discussed everyday topics. Naira described a planning meeting she had earlier with a client preparing a corporate anniversary celebration. Bradwell listened attentively and offered suggestions about venue layout based on his experience with architectural spaces. To anyone observing them, the evening looked ordinary. But Naira understood that maintaining normal behavior served a purpose. She needed time. Time to think clearly. Time to observe. Time to decide how she would respond to the betrayal she now knew existed. Confrontation without preparation could lead to denial or arguments without proof. Naira preferred certainty, so she continued treating Bradwell with calm respect, speaking to him with the same steady voice she had always used. Meanwhile, inside her mind, she began quietly planning how she would take control of the situation rather than allowing it to control her. In the weeks following the wedding, Varel Harton continued interacting with Naira as though nothing unusual had occurred. Her messages remained cheerful, often suggesting casual meetings or social gatherings just as she had done for years. One afternoon, Varel invited Naira to meet at a cafe they had visited frequently during university. Naira accepted. When she arrived, Varel greeted her warmly with a hug and began speaking enthusiastically about the wedding photos that had recently been delivered. She praised the ceremony again, repeating how elegant the venue had looked beside the lake. Naira listened quietly. From Varel's perspective, the conversation appeared completely natural. She spoke about upcoming travel plans, social events in the city, and a fashion exhibition she hoped Naira might attend with her later that month. There was no hesitation in her tone. No sign that she believed Naira suspected anything. At one point, Varel even asked about Bradwell. "How is married life treating you two so far?" she said with a smile. Naira answered calmly, explaining that both of them had returned to busy work schedules but were adjusting well. The exchange revealed something important to Naira. Varel seemed comfortable maintaining the friendship exactly as it had always been. Whether that comfort came from confidence or from the belief that the secret remained hidden, Naira could not yet determine. Still, she remained composed. She responded politely to every question and allowed the conversation to move naturally. Inside, however, Naira observed every word and expression carefully. The more Varel behaved as though nothing had changed, the clearer it became that confronting her too soon would reveal little. Patience remained Naira's greatest advantage. As the weeks continued, Naira began paying closer attention to the interactions between Bradwell and Varel whenever they appeared in the same environment. Social gatherings provided the easiest opportunities for observation. Occasionally, friends invited the couple to dinners or informal celebrations where Varel also attended. During these events, Naira noticed small details that might have seemed insignificant before the wedding. Bradwell and Varel often greeted each other comfortably, exchanging brief jokes or comments about recent activities. Their tone remained light and casual, yet the familiarity between them stood out more clearly now that Naira understood what might exist beneath the surface. Naira did not interrupt those interactions. Instead, she watched. She noticed how quickly their conversations shifted whenever she joined the group. She noticed how Varel sometimes avoided extended eye contact when discussing certain topics related to the wedding. None of these behaviors confirmed anything directly, but together, they created a pattern that reinforced Naira's growing certainty. Observing quietly also allowed Naira to understand something about their personalities. Neither Bradwell nor Varel appeared worried that the truth might surface. Their confidence suggested they believed the secret remained safely hidden. That belief worked in Naira's favor. Because people who feel secure often reveal more than they intend, Naira continued participating in conversations normally while keeping her emotions controlled. Years of professional experience had taught her how to remain calm, even when managing difficult situations. Those skills now served a different purpose. She was no longer simply observing two people she trusted. She was studying the behavior of two people who had broken that trust without realizing she already knew. While processing everything she had learned, Naira refused to allow the situation to disrupt the professional life she had spent years building. Solin Events continued receiving new client requests, and several upcoming projects required careful attention. One of the most important involved organizing a large charity gala for a nonprofit organization dedicated to housing development in Seattle. The event would bring together business leaders, investors, and community advocates who supported expanding affordable housing initiatives. Naira threw herself into the planning process with determination. She reviewed venue layouts, coordinated with caterers, and designed floral arrangements that reflected the elegance expected at such a prestigious gathering. Her team noticed her increased focus. Naira spent long hours refining details and communicating with sponsors to ensure the evening would run smoothly. The charity expected hundreds of influential guests, and the event represented an opportunity for Celine Events to strengthen its reputation further. Working on the gala provided more than professional satisfaction. It gave Naira space to think clearly about her personal situation. Instead of allowing anger or sadness to dominate her thoughts, she directed her energy toward creating something meaningful. The gala also presented an interesting possibility. Many of the city's most prominent figures would attend, including people from both the architectural community and social circles that Bradwell and Virel occasionally moved within. Naira began considering how such a setting might provide the opportunity she needed, not for revenge driven by emotion, but for revealing truth in a way that could not easily be denied or hidden. The idea remained only a quiet thought at first, yet with each passing day, the charity event began to look less like another professional project and more like the stage for something larger. As preparations for the charity gala progressed, Naira started shaping a strategy that balanced patience with precision. The event would take place inside one of Seattle's most respected cultural venues, a large hall designed for formal gatherings and public speeches. Guests would include investors, architects, nonprofit leaders, and local officials interested in supporting housing initiatives across the city. Because Celine Events organized the gala, Naira would naturally stand on stage during the evening to thank sponsors and introduce several keynote speakers. That responsibility gave her control over the program. While reviewing the event schedule with her team, Naira made small adjustments to ensure certain moments unfolded exactly as she intended. Every detail remained professional and appropriate for a charity gathering, yet she understood how the evening's structure could also create an unexpected opportunity. Bradwell would almost certainly attend. His professional work connected directly to the housing initiative being promoted at the gala. Virel, who enjoyed attending high-profile social events, would likely appear as well once she learned about the guest list. Naira continued communicating with both of them normally. When she mentioned the gala during casual conversations, neither of them reacted with hesitation. In fact, both expressed interest in attending the event. Their enthusiasm confirmed what Naira had already suspected. They still believed their secret remained hidden. By the time the final venue contracts were signed and the guest invitations distributed, Naira had quietly finalized the details of the evening. The charity gala would not only support an important cause, it would also become the moment when truth stepped into the open. And once that evening arrived, Bradwell Dorse and Virel Harton would face a situation neither of them expected. The evening of the charity gala arrived after weeks of preparation. Inside the grand hall overlooking downtown Seattle, Naira Celine moved calmly between staff members as they finalized the last details before guests arrived. Celine Events had organized many elegant gatherings before, but this evening carried a different level of importance. The event supported a housing initiative aimed at expanding community living spaces along the waterfront, a project that attracted attention from both business leaders and city officials. The venue reflected the significance of the cause. Tall windows framed the city skyline while soft lighting illuminated tables arranged across the hall. Each table carried floral arrangements designed by Naira herself, combining white roses with subtle greenery that matched the formal tone of the evening. At the front of the room, a large stage stood ready for the speeches that would guide the program later in the night. A projection screen behind the podium displayed the charity's mission, while volunteers moved quietly between the tables, placing informational materials for guests. Naira checked the schedule once more before greeting the first attendees arriving through the main entrance. Sponsors and supporters stepped into the hall wearing formal attire, exchanging greetings and congratulating the organizers for hosting such an important event. Many of them recognized Naira immediately. Her reputation in the city's event planning community had grown steadily over the years. Bradwell Dorse also arrived shortly after the first wave of guests. As expected, the architectural community had strong interest in the housing initiative. He greeted Naira politely, unaware of the deeper purpose behind the evening she had organized. A short time later, Virel Harton appeared among the crowd as well. Neither of them suspected that the event unfolding around them would soon transform into something neither had prepared for. As the hall filled with guests, the atmosphere reflected both elegance and anticipation. Conversations moved easily between tables as attendees discussed the housing initiative and the opportunities it presented for future development across the city. Business leaders from construction companies and investment firms spoke with nonprofit representatives about funding strategies. Architects examined display boards showing proposed community designs. Local officials greeted donors who had contributed generously to the project. The event had attracted exactly the audience Naira expected. People whose voices carried influence in both business and civic circles. Among them stood individuals who knew Bradwell through professional connections. Several colleagues approached him during the evening to discuss his recent projects and ask his opinion about the housing initiative being promoted. Bradwell responded confidently, describing architectural approaches that could balance practical construction needs with long-term community planning. Nearby, Virel moved through the room with her usual social energy. She greeted acquaintances warmly and complimented the elegance of the venue design. Several guests praised Naira's work as the organizer. "The atmosphere here feels refined without being overwhelming," one investor commented while examining the floral arrangements. Another guest remarked on how smoothly the evening flowed, noting that every detail appeared carefully planned. Naira listened graciously to these compliments while maintaining her focus on the program schedule. The first speeches of the evening began shortly afterward. Representatives from the charity explained their mission and thanked donors for supporting the cause. The audience responded with polite applause. Soon the program reached the moment where Naira herself would step onto the stage to address the guests and acknowledge the community effort behind the event. For most people in the room, the evening remained a professional gathering dedicated to a meaningful cause. But, for Naira, the moment approaching the stage carried a purpose far beyond event organization. When the Master of Ceremonies introduced Naira Solein, the audience responded with warm applause. Many guests already knew her as the professional responsible for organizing the evening's event. Naira walked toward the podium with calm confidence. The stage lights illuminated the hall as she looked across the audience. Hundreds of faces turned toward her, waiting to hear the closing remarks before the final portion of the program. Naira began by thanking the charity leaders, volunteers, and sponsors whose contributions had made the evening possible. She spoke clearly about the importance of communities built on cooperation and shared responsibility. Housing projects, she explained, succeed not only through architectural design, but also through the trust that exists between the people who live and work within them. Her voice remained steady as she continued. "Every strong community," Naira said, "relies on values that guide the relationships between its members." She paused briefly, allowing the room to remain quiet. "Those values include loyalty, honesty, and integrity." The audience listened attentively. Many people in the hall had spent years building professional reputations based on those same principles. Naira continued by explaining how trust forms the foundation of meaningful partnerships. Without trust, even the most impressive projects lose their strength. Her words carried a deeper meaning than most listeners realized. For Bradwell and Virel, however, the speech began to feel different. Both of them watched from separate tables as Naira spoke calmly about commitment and accountability. Her tone remained respectful, yet her message slowly guided the room toward a more personal reflection on the importance of integrity. By the time Naira reached the final portion of her speech, the hall had grown completely silent. After speaking about the importance of trust, Naira paused for a moment before continuing. "There are two people here tonight," she said, "who played important roles in my personal journey over the past few years." Her statement drew curious expressions from several guests. Many assumed she intended to acknowledge supporters who had helped organize the event or contributed to the charity. Instead, Naira looked directly toward the tables where Bradwell Dorse and Virel Harton were seated. "I would like to invite Bradwell Dorse and Virel Harton to join me on stage for a moment." A ripple of polite applause moved through the room. Bradwell hesitated briefly, surprised by the unexpected invitation. Still, he stood from his chair and walked toward the stage with a polite smile. Across the hall, Virel followed as well, adjusting her posture before stepping forward with confident composure. Neither of them appeared worried. From their perspective, Naira might simply be thanking them publicly for supporting the event or celebrating the success of her recent marriage. When they reached the stage, Naira greeted them calmly. Bradwell stood to her right, while Virel took a position slightly to her left. The audience watched with curiosity as the three individuals faced the crowd together beneath the bright stage lights. Naira waited until the applause faded before continuing. Her expression remained composed. "Both of these people," she said slowly, have been part of my life during some very important moments. The room grew quiet again as guests sensed that the conversation was shifting in a direction they had not expected. Naira allowed a few seconds of silence to settle across the hall before speaking again. She looked briefly toward Bradwell and Varel, then returned her gaze to the audience. Several months ago, Naira began, I experienced a moment that changed my understanding of trust. Her tone remained calm and controlled. On the night of my wedding, after the reception had ended, I stepped away from a gathering at a hotel lounge to help a family member arrange transportation. The audience listened closely. While returning to the room, I paused outside the door for a moment and heard a conversation taking place inside. Bradwell's posture stiffened slightly. Varel's confident expression began to fade. Naira continued speaking without raising her voice. I heard a sentence that stayed in my mind long after that night ended. The hall remained completely silent. Then Naira repeated the words clearly so that every person in the room could hear them. I and her best friend did it on our wedding night. The reaction was immediate. Gasps spread through the audience as guests looked toward Bradwell and Varel with stunned expressions. Some people exchanged confused glances while others leaned forward in their chairs, struggling to understand what they had just heard. On stage, Bradwell's face lost its composure. Varel's expression froze. Neither of them expected those words to be spoken publicly in front of hundreds of witnesses. Naira stepped slightly away from the microphone. She did not raise her voice or insult either of them. She simply allowed the silence to fill the hall. And in that silence, the truth she had carried quietly for months now stood openly before everyone. The silence inside the grand hall lasted several seconds after Naira repeated the sentence she had overheard months earlier. Guests looked toward Bradwell and Varel, with expressions ranging from disbelief to quiet disappointment. Neither of them spoke immediately. Bradwell stood beside the podium, as though searching for words that refused to appear. His earlier confidence had disappeared, replaced by the uncomfortable awareness that hundreds of people now watched him closely. Several individuals in the audience recognized him not only as Naira's husband, but also as a respected architect involved in important development projects across the city. Moments earlier, he had been conversing with colleagues about community planning. Now those same colleagues exchanged uneasy glances. Varel's composure faded as well. The energetic personality that usually carried her through social situations seemed suddenly absent. She avoided looking directly at the audience, while whispers began spreading quietly through the room. A few guests lowered their voices and spoke to the people seated beside them. Others simply observed the stage with thoughtful expressions. No one laughed. No one applauded. Instead, the atmosphere of admiration that had filled the hall earlier shifted into a quiet recognition that something serious had just been revealed. Professional reputations often depend on how individuals conduct themselves when no one is watching. Naira's statement suggested that Bradwell and Varel had acted in ways that contradicted the values they publicly supported. Within social and professional circles, news travels quickly. By the end of the evening, many guests had already formed opinions about what they had witnessed. Bradwell and Varel understood this as clearly as anyone in the room, and for the first time since the wedding night, they realized that the secret they believed remained hidden had now become impossible to ignore. While the audience processed the meaning of Naira's words, she remained composed on stage. She did not raise her voice or continue speaking harshly toward Bradwell or Varel. Instead, she stepped slightly away from the microphone and allowed the moment to settle naturally. That choice surprised many guests. Some expected anger or emotional confrontation. Public scenes often escalate quickly when personal betrayals become visible. But Naira chose a different response. Her posture remained steady as she addressed the audience one final time. "I organized this evening to support an important cause," she said calmly. "The work being done to expand housing opportunities across this city deserves our attention and respect." Her statement redirected the focus of the room toward the purpose of the charity event. Several guests nodded quietly. Naira then thanked the attendees again for their contributions and expressed appreciation for the organizations working to improve community living conditions. After finishing her remarks, she stepped away from the podium. Bradwell and Varel remained on stage momentarily, unsure how to respond. Naira did not look back at them as she walked toward the side exit of the stage. Her calm departure carried more weight than any argument could have. Guests watched her leave with expressions of respect. Dignity often reveals strength more clearly than anger. By choosing restraint instead of confrontation, Naira demonstrated the same composure that had defined her professional reputation for years. In that moment, many people in the room understood that they had witnessed not only a revelation, but also the quiet strength of someone who refused to allow betrayal to control her behavior. In the days following the charity gala, Naira returned to her daily routines with remarkable focus. Although the events of that evening had spread quickly through professional circles, she refused to allow the situation to distract her from the responsibilities she had built over years of dedication. Celine Events continued receiving inquiries from clients planning weddings, corporate gatherings, and non-profit celebrations. Naira approached each project with the same level of care she had always provided. Her staff noticed that she maintained her calm leadership style despite the personal challenges she had faced. During planning meetings, she reviewed event layouts, coordinated with vendors, and guided clients through decisions about design and scheduling. Her ability to remain composed reassured everyone around her. Some clients privately expressed sympathy for what had happened. Naira acknowledged their concern politely, but rarely discussed the situation in detail. Instead, she redirected conversations toward the events they were planning together. Focusing on her work allowed Naira to regain a sense of balance. Professional tasks required attention and organization, leaving little room for dwelling on painful memories. Each successful event reminded her that her identity extended far beyond the betrayal she had experienced. Friends and family offered support as well. Her parents reminded her that the patience she learned in their flower shop had always guided her through difficult moments. Naira listened quietly and appreciated their encouragement. Rather than viewing the situation as the end of something meaningful, she began seeing it as the beginning of a new chapter. A chapter where her future would be shaped by her own decisions, rather than by the actions of people who had broken her trust. Unexpectedly, the way Naira handled the situation during the charity gala strengthened her professional reputation. Several guests who attended the event spoke highly of her composure and leadership. Many admired how she balanced personal honesty with respect for the charity's mission. Within weeks, Celine Events received new requests from organizations interested in hosting similar gatherings. Corporate leaders and nonprofit directors recognized Naira's ability to manage complex events with professionalism, even under intense circumstances. One company invited her team to organize a regional business conference. Another nonprofit asked for her help designing a large fundraising dinner. Each opportunity expanded the visibility of her company. Members of the city's social and professional community also began expressing their respect more openly. When Naira attended meetings or industry gatherings, people greeted her with genuine admiration. They had seen how she handled betrayal without losing control of the moment. For many observers, that behavior reflected integrity. Instead of damaging her reputation, the events surrounding the gala revealed the strength of her character. Naira continued leading her team with steady confidence. She invested time in mentoring younger planners within the company and encouraged them to approach every event with the same thoughtful attention that defined Celine Events from the beginning. Success no longer represented simply the growth of her business. It represented proof that personal challenges could be overcome without sacrificing dignity. Through dedication and consistency, Naira turned a painful experience into an opportunity for growth. Months passed after the charity gala, and the intensity of the situation gradually faded from daily conversation. Bradwell and Varel disappeared from Naira's life as naturally as they had once entered it. Their absence no longer caused the same emotional weight it had at the beginning. Instead, Naira found herself reflecting on the lessons the experience had revealed. One evening she returned to the lakeside path where Bradwell had once proposed. The quiet water looked similar to the night they had walked there together years earlier. Standing beside the shoreline, Naira considered how much her perspective had changed. She still believed in the values that shaped her childhood: patience, honesty, loyalty. But now she understood those principles more clearly. Trust should never be given blindly. It must grow through consistent actions rather than promises alone. Naira also realized that anger would not help her move forward. Holding resentment would only tie her future to a past she had already chosen to leave behind. Instead, she focused on gratitude for the strength she had discovered within herself. Choosing dignity over confrontation had protected her peace of mind and allowed her to rebuild her life with confidence. As she walked slowly along the shoreline, the evening air felt calm and reassuring. For the first time since the wedding night, Naira recognized that she no longer carried the weight of betrayal. She had moved beyond it. And in doing so, she found something far more valuable than revenge. She found peace. Life gradually settled into a new rhythm for Naira Solena. Months after the charity gala, Soline events continued expanding in ways she had once hoped for, but never rushed to achieve. The company's reputation had strengthened across Seattle's professional community. Event planners, business leaders, and nonprofit organizations began recommending her services to others who wanted gatherings designed with thoughtfulness and precision. Naira approached every new project with the same care she learned years earlier in her parents' flower shop. She believed details mattered. A well-designed room could influence how people felt the moment they walked through the door. Lighting could soften a space. Music could shape the tone of a conversation. Floral arrangements could create warmth without overwhelming the environment. Clients appreciated the calm confidence she brought to every meeting. When couples approached her to plan weddings, Naira listened carefully to their stories before offering suggestions. She encouraged them to focus on the meaning of their commitment rather than the pressure of creating a perfect image for others. That perspective resonated with many people. Soline Events soon expanded its team to manage the growing number of requests arriving each month. Naira trained new planners personally, teaching them how to guide clients with patience and respect. Her office became a place where creativity and professionalism worked together. Although the challenges of the past had shaped her understanding of trust, Naira refused to allow those experiences to limit her optimism. Instead, she poured her energy into building something meaningful. Each successful event reminded her that strength does not come from avoiding difficult moments. Strength comes from continuing forward with clarity and purpose after those moments pass. And as her company continued to grow, Naira discovered that the future she was creating felt stronger than the life she once believed she had lost. Nearly a year after the charity gala, Naira began organizing another community event supporting cultural programs across the city. The project involved partnerships with artists, nonprofit organizations, and media professionals interested in highlighting local initiatives. During one planning meeting, she was introduced to Orion Vale. Orion worked as a documentary filmmaker, known for creating thoughtful films about people whose lives influence their communities in meaningful ways. His work focused on real stories rather than dramatic headlines. From the beginning, Orion's approach to conversation stood out. Instead of rushing through introductions, he listened carefully as Naira explained the vision behind the event she was organizing. He asked questions about how Soline Events balanced creativity with the responsibility of representing important causes. Naira appreciated his curiosity. Their discussion moved easily from event planning into broader topics about storytelling and the power of shared experiences. Orion described how documentaries could capture moments that revealed the true character of individuals facing challenges or building something valuable for others. Naira found his perspective interesting. He seemed less interested in fame or recognition than in understanding how people navigated important turning points in their lives. After the meeting concluded, Orion thanked Naira for the conversation and mentioned that he hoped to attend the event once filming schedules allowed. Their interaction lasted only a short time, yet it left a quiet impression. Unlike many people who approached her after learning about the events surrounding her past relationship, Orion did not ask intrusive questions or offer sympathy. Instead, he treated her as someone whose work deserved respect. That simple approach created the foundation for a connection that would continue developing in the months ahead. Over the following months, Naira and Orion crossed paths several times while working on community events and cultural programs throughout the city. Their conversations often began with professional topics. Orion asked thoughtful questions about how Naira designed gatherings that encouraged people to interact comfortably. Naira, in turn, showed interest in the way Orion structured documentary stories to capture genuine human experiences. Gradually, their discussions moved beyond work. Sometimes they met for coffee after meetings to continue exchanging ideas. Other times they walked through public art exhibits or visited quiet waterfront parks where conversation flowed naturally. What stood out most to Naira was the pace of their connection. Orion never pushed conversations in a direction that felt rushed. He respected boundaries and allowed their interactions to grow at a comfortable rhythm. This patience felt familiar. It reminded Naira of the values she had always believed in long before her previous relationship had tested them. One afternoon, while discussing a new documentary project Orion was planning, He shared something personal about why he chose filmmaking as his career. He explained that he believed stories carried the power to remind people of their strength during difficult periods. Naira listened quietly. She understood the meaning behind his words more deeply than most people might realize. Over time, their friendship strengthened into something more meaningful. There were no dramatic declarations or sudden expectations. Instead, their connection developed through honesty, respect, and shared curiosity about each other's perspectives. For Naira, the experience confirmed that trust could still exist when two people approached a relationship with patience and sincerity. One evening after completing another successful event, Naira returned to the lakeside path that had quietly followed many chapters of her life. The calm water reflected the city lights as she walked slowly along the shoreline. Moments like this often encouraged reflection. Years earlier, she had walked the same path with Bradwell during the early days of their relationship. Later, it became the place where he proposed. Now the path held a different meaning. Naira understood that every experience, even painful ones, could offer lessons when viewed with clarity rather than resentment. The betrayal she once discovered had tested her beliefs about trust. For a period of time, she questioned whether loyalty still held the same value she once believed it did. But time allowed her to see the situation differently. Trust itself had never been the problem. The problem was giving trust to people who did not respect its importance. Real loyalty requires honesty, even when honesty feels uncomfortable. Strong relationships depend on actions that consistently match the promises people make. Naira also realized something about her own strength. Choosing patience rather than reacting with anger had protected her dignity. It allowed her to face the truth on her own terms and move forward without regret. As she looked across the quiet lake, Naira felt grateful for the resilience that had carried her through those moments. Her past no longer defined her future. Instead, it reminded her to approach every new relationship with wisdom and confidence. Naira Saleem's journey offers a reminder about something many people face at different points in life. Trust is one of the most valuable gifts we offer another person. When someone respects that gift, relationships grow stronger over time. But when trust is broken, the way we respond to that moment defines who we become afterward. Naira could have chosen anger. She could have allowed bitterness to shape her future. Instead, she chose dignity. By remaining calm, observing carefully, and revealing the truth with confidence, she protected her self-respect and moved forward without losing the values that had always guided her life. That decision allowed her to rebuild not only her career, but also her belief in meaningful connections. Today, her company continues helping couples celebrate commitments built on honesty. And in her personal life, she now understands that true loyalty appears through consistent actions rather than words alone. Her story reminds us that emotional strength does not mean avoiding pain. It means standing firmly in your principles, even when life tests them. Now, we would love to hear from you. If you were in Naira's position, how would you have handled that moment at the charity gala? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story moved you or gave you something to reflect on, please support the channel by liking the video, sharing it with someone who might need encouragement, and subscribing to Twisted Love Tales with Mr. Easton for more powerful stories about relationships, choices, and personal growth. Because sometimes the greatest victories in life are the quiet ones that protect our dignity.
Truth reveals itself when people think no one is listening.